The next tool that I'd like to discuss is that of extreme cold. Now, usually this is going to be in the form of like an ice bath, some sort of a cold tub full of cold water, or it could be in the form of cryotherapy. Cryotherapy, I don't think it's quite as popular today as it was back when it kind of came out. It caught a lot of hype and got very, very popular at a certain time, but it is also very expensive. Most people are not going to be going to a cryotherapy salon or spa or whatever they want to call it. Most people are not going to have the money to buy their own. So usually the most common thing is just some sort of an ice bath. And even an ice bath can be more expensive than a lot of people would like to spend. So definitely, it's all the same though. It's extreme cold temperatures. How do extreme cold temperatures impact our recovery? Now, more so recently, and you might already be familiar with this, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you that the most recent research has kind of shown us that extreme cold actually blunts our body's responses to muscle damage and muscle recovery. So those beneficial processes that we want to be occurring in our muscles to get bigger and to get stronger and to get faster, to, have an improved body and athletic capability in response to our training, those processes that make that happen are blunted and slowed down due to extreme cold temperatures. So immediately, I'm probably not going to recommend them to you. Now, another thing that we've talked about is that of blood flow. Now, blood flow is really going to be the most important thing that we can do for our recovery, but cold actually decreases blood flow. Cold is vasoconstrictive, whereas heat promotes vasodilation. And that is actually just a body temperature regulation mechanism. But when we get extremely cold, our blood vessels tighten down, and that can actually decrease our blood flow. Now, I've talked about with the compression garments that it increases our blood flow in a beneficial way for like edema to increase our blood pressure, but that is a different case. That is, again, when we're experiencing like excessive swelling and things like that. Compression garments might be indicated in those sorts of scenarios. However, if that's not the case, and under normal circumstances, at least for many healthy athletes, young athletes, then a constriction of the blood vessels is going to decrease blood flow, and that is not going to be very desirable. It can also be anti-inflammatory, but that could be not good either. Sometimes that inflammation response is exactly what we want because it helps, as I've said, our body make meaningful progress and meaningful recovery that improves our athletic capability in response to our training. Now, extreme cold can actually, in the same way that I mentioned about the massaging and the foam rolling, it can actually decrease pain. It can be sort of a painkiller. And if you've ever taken an ice bath, I think you immediately are going to know what I mean. But it is kind of a shock to your skin. And, your skin kind of like hurts a little bit, at least if you're new to it, right? You get in this extremely cold bath and it's really like an overwhelming thing, and it kind of sends this, very, very cold sensation, obviously, to your skin and to your brain. And just as I've mentioned with the massage, that is going to kind of compete with the signals that are being sent to the brain of pain. So it can definitely be a pain-relieving thing to engage in this cryotherapy or ice baths for that reason. However, it's just not something that we really want to do if our goal is to improve post-training, right? So if you go to the gym, you're doing strength training or power training or speed training or whatever, you're going to get sore, you're going to get tired, you're going to get fatigued, you're going to have these breakdown and these different tissues and things like that. The goal of that is not just to break down and get tired, but it is to recover from that and get better. And the physiological processes that make that happen are blunted in response to cold. So it is not something I recommend doing, at least in close proximity to our training. Now, I know that lots of people like to do cold water immersion and things for other benefits like, discipline and mental rigor, and some people who are very, very energized. That is because of a release of catecholamines like adrenaline or epinephrine. those things can be very, very desirable benefits for, these extreme cold temperatures. If that is something that you are hoping to get out of it, then the best piece of advice that I can give you is to, first of all, not do it at least immediately after your exercise. At the very least, you should be waiting until several hours after, or really what I would probably recommend is to do it, maybe in the morning, first thing upon waking up, and then you go train perhaps a couple hours later in the day. That really, at that point, should not be blunting any sort of recovery response, at least in a meaningful way. But the other thing you could do is just to take a cold shower. Now, in the literature of, getting these benefits from, or getting these effects and anti-inflammatory effects from these extreme cold temperatures, usually a cold shower is actually not quite cold enough, and it doesn't make sustained contact with your skin for long enough to actually have those anti-inflammatory effects and things like that. But if you've ever taken a cold shower, it is probably going to be cold enough and be in contact with your skin long enough to signal, that get that fight or flight response going and release the adrenaline into your body and kind of give you the results for, discipline as well as mental vigor that you are looking for out of this extreme cold temperature. So if that is something you're looking to do, that is what I would recommend. Now, that anti-inflammatory effect could actually have some indications, times that we might want that effect and we might want to do things like a cold bath. But I'm going to talk about that in just a minute when I talk about anti-inflammatory drugs.